What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Malky Pablo, and basically, y'all know as of late, I've been doing videos on how to fight certain fighters. So some of those fighters I noticed have similar styles, and by being the extreme of requested guys y'all want me to cover, I figured what I do is stylistically, since some of them are similar, I'll just break down that particular style like on the game and how you can actually utilize it on the game. Also, shout out, prayers out to the great Spence. You know what I'm saying? Home, you gonna recover. But I seen guys wanting me to actually do how to fight like Earl Spence, Canelo Alvarez, Gervonta Tank Davis, and a few others. But I mentioned those particular three because stylistically they don't fight the exact same thing, but it's one thing they have in common, and this word is very important, especially on fight night, and that word is ring presence. Gennady Golovkin is another fighter with ring presence, and what I mean by that is those are guys who are effective at cutting the ring off and imposing their will on their opponent, and they have very smart offense. You're not just throwing punches for the sake of doing it. Those aren't guys that fight in straight lines. They're really good at putting punches together. You could put punches together on Fight Night Champion, even though people get the illusion that it strictly favors and caters to the boxers, which is true to a certain extent, but you could effectively fight like each one of those guys I just mentioned. The key to doing that is the one thing all of those guys have is a pretty consistent jab, and that word again, ring presence. They can effectively cut the ring off, cut you off. What I mean by that, for those that don't know, if a fighter is rotating to their right and you're an orthodox, it doesn't matter what stance you're in, you will go to the opposite direction. So if they're going to their right, orthodox for example, if they're going to their right, you need to be going to your left. You're going to box them in on that side. Vice versa. If they go to the opposite side, you go to the opposite side. You want to anticipate their movement. Roman Gonzalez is another guy I think of when I think of that. When you do that, you're making the ring smaller. By you making the ring smaller, you could force your opponent into throwing punches they really don't want to throw. Now they moving, they utilizing the ring, they're doing a lot of stepping. You got to remember though, when you're the imposing fighter like those guys I just said, you put yourself in harm's way, so where obviously they're on the back foot because you're bringing the fights on, so they have opportunities. That's why you got to make sure you sharp with what you're doing, like Canelo, Earl Spence at the very top level, Gervonta Davis. Like the X factor that they have is the punch placement. They make sure they invest in the body. You want to close the gap completely. You don't want to lunge in with punches. You don't want to fight in straight lines. You want to cut the ring off. You got to punch at the proper time. You got to throw the proper punches. When you throw a punch and your opponent react, you want to make sure now that you're in position to where you can either pitch again or you could get out of range. Sometimes a simple step back after you land the shot is the way to go and still stay on your opponent. Literally cut the ring off, utilize your jab, throw your straight to the body, move around, cut the ring off. The more you cut the ring off, you can literally force your opponent and doing something they don't want to do on offense, because now you're making them fight way quicker. See what I'm saying? Prime example of that. A high tempo. All of those guys we just said fight at a high tempo as the fight evolve. Now, I'm not saying if the fighter's on the back foot, they can't beat you if you do that. You most certainly can. Ricky Hatton Mayweather is a prime example. He speeded the fight up and the beating sped up as well. But you have to be smart. Ricky, that's my guy. He's a little bit more reckless than those guys I just announced. Like, you got to be very, very strategic, because this game definitely do have it to where, like, you can fight aggressive, but I'm like, counter punching is the easy thing to do, especially with a world-class back foot fighter. So you got to make sure you really do everything properly, you'll know if you're affecting your opponent as well. Because what they was doing that was working early on in the fight, you'll notice that it literally does not work as the fight evolve. Like they like, for example, we know the punch people like to throw. They like to throw the straight. They like to throw the step uppercut. Those are the two money punches. If you smart enough and you say, okay, I'm gonna take away this straight. I'm gonna step over. I'm gonna counter to the body, and like you'll be able to do that. But you want to make sure you can do that with whatever your block is. Meaning, OWC, we know the textbook block is an amazing block, but it's not really good in comparison to Philly shell or cross. It's more the traditional block. Like in terms of a regular player, if you're going against a regular player, you'll be perfectly fine. If you're going against what you all will call a spammer, it's ways you could get through that textbook. I don't want to expose that right now because I know it's still some textbook users. But if you play Fight Night, you know how you break the textbook. Cross block, if you play the game, you know how to do it. Same with Philly shell. So you want to make sure when you do this, you do it in the proper one. Personally, I say if you want to fight this way in OWC, personally, I recommend you do it with the cross block, if I'm being perfectly honest with you all. But I know some of you all, y'all stuck in y'all ways and y'all want to do y'all own thing. So it don't even matter whether it's Philly shell, cross, or textbook. The main thing you got to do is use ring presence, cut the ring off effectively. Do not force offense. If you losing rounds, remember it's 10 to 12 rounds. I don't know how many rounds you all fight. It is 10 to 12 rounds. The clock's more than likely accelerated. It's 2-minute rounds, but that's a good 20 minutes plus. I say around 26 minutes, give or take in the fight. Like, if you really apply all of those things, you'll notice around the 4th or the 5th round, the fight will start looking like way up to who you want it to be. So cut the ring off from a distance. Do not chase. I don't care how rough the fight get. Do not chase. Remember, it's a bend but don't break game. You have to do this in order to win tough matches. Don't throw 4 or 5 punches. No, you do that when you see, okay, my opponent gassing. Another thing to do, look at the mouthpiece when you in the ring. Like, look at the mouthpiece. You'll be able to see, like, oh, my opponent's slightly tired. Okay, punches starting to get through. That's another sign. When you start to land punches consistently that you weren't landing at first, that's a byproduct of your opponent's health is more than likely low, and they really starting to get, now shots starting to land because of that. And I'm like, but in order for their stamina to get low like that, you had to be doing something good on your end. You got to know when to box on the outside, when to fight coming forward. And when you use that style, like I said, the Spence, the Canelo, and the Tank, ring presence is most important. Do not follow your opponent. Anticipate their movements. Know when to close in. Know when to step to a certain angle. Box them out. Understand. Look at their patterns. That's the most important. Whether it's if you're trying to fight like Spence, shoot anybody, Canelo, Tank Davis, no matter who you fight, always being able to read patterns is always going to be the key. If you know you're going against a guy that only throws the straight and the uppercut, okay, you need to figure out a way you can get past that straight. You can close the gap. You can either step in or you can like step over some. You want to box them in. When they try to slide out the ropes, no, you want to be able to box them in on the other side. Like, it's little things like that. If your opponent's throwing the jab, you need to say, okay, I can take a slight step back. I could pull counter just a little bit. Because if you look at Spence and those guys we mentioned, even though they're aggressive fighters, they are actually technical too. They fundamentally sound. Meaning, it ain't like they just basically going like head first. I ain't gonna say no fighter's name, but more Rocky Balboa style. Like, it ain't gonna be nothing silly like that. You feel me? So I definitely think if you all like apply this, y'all will notice a very strong improvement in your style, and especially when you go against those guys that fight on the back foot. Like, that's what I really want to hear y'all stories on, fighting those guys. Because when you fighting another guy that's a pressure fighter, you could probably fight them the same way you've been fighting. But I'm saying, for the most part, you want to avoid that as much as you want to avoid basically fighting in straight lines. And this is basically all the stuff I touched on in this video. You want to avoid that as much. I mean, you want to avoid what you've been doing as much as possible, but the stats, the stuff I listed early, y'all definitely got to do. You got to be able to understand, okay, I should step this way. If you move right, step left, vice versa. Because I'm like, son, what will happen is you closing the gap, they are forcing their offense. When they do stuff like jabs, you can literally throw right hand right over the top of the jab. That's common sense. That's common boxing. Like, this literally, and then I'm going to tell you something else. Once you know this, you can tell when their stamina like an 80 or 70. I done talked to plenty of people on fight night, and they lied and said, my stamina is 90. I'm like, nah, your stamina ain't a 90. Played this game too long. You can start doing stuff like uppercuts, closing the gap. Close the gap completely. What I mean by close the gap is like, say you're in a fight, right? And you're going against a guy that's just stepping back. You can literally step straight in, guards up. Here's the problem when you do that though. If they in the center of the ring, all they got to do is literally, they could take a step back themselves, or they could like step completely out the way, like step over, make you reset. If that happens, obviously you in trouble. But it ain't that you necessarily in trouble. You just gonna be forced to reset. I'm saying if y'all get in a fight like that and that keep happening and you don't make the adjustments, then you stuck. That's why I say the personnel of the fighter you fighting and the experience of yourself in fights of this magnitude definitely will help you get through that. Like, I know some of y'all will probably say, man, I don't understand what you saying. I wish I seen this in video form, which in video form, of course, obviously it's visual, so you'll probably be able to see, but I figured me telling you this, y'all to be able to understand. And I'm tired as a mug, so if y'all hear me repeating the same thing, that's like a byproduct of that. But that's pretty much what it is. In simplest form, ring presence, cutting the ring off. Do not follow your opponent. Use a consistent jab. Invest in body shots. But don't just start hooking in, just throwing like anything, because you will get clocked. So make sure you cutting the ring off. You closing the gap. Whenever you want to go to the body or something like that. Because when you the one that's forcing the offense and you forcing the pace, you can't leave yourself exposed. So you got to make more of a fundamental adjustment opposed to the guy fighting on the outside. You literally have to say, okay, I closed the gap completely. He don't have too much room to move, counter. And even if you getting hit, it's fine. Remember, the purpose is to break your opponent, like those guys Tank, Saul Alvarez, like Earl Smith. It's literally breaking them as the fight evolves. You ain't gonna do all the work in 1 or 2 rounds. Sometimes it takes 7 or 8 rounds to do it. So it's your boy signing out. Shout out to the homie Earl once again. You know what I'm saying? And get this done. If y'all have any questions or some parts of what I said ain't make sense, please type it in the comment section below. I'll go over it. I'm tired, so I know I probably sounded silly throughout the entire video, but nonetheless, I'm still here. Let me know.